is there anyone here who does not know what data visualization is? Like a few years ago, if I asked this question, a lot of hands would go up. Has anyone here practiced anything with data visualization, except for Excel? Cool. So there's a little bit. But there is some understanding of what it is. And essentially what data visualization is you take data, large amounts of it, and you try to find ways to understand it and communicate it in different ways. And so my studio, Pitch Interactive, we're 5 people. Our office is in downtown Oakland. It's more of a creative shop than anything else. But my background is economics. So the economist here in the room will understand this graph very well. And anyone else here who's taken econ, I think just like the basic 101. This was something, though, that kind of sparked my interest in this field early on. It sort of planted the seed. I have a degree in international economics, and from the University of Arkansas. I always say that because people are like, dude. And it was an interesting place to be because at the time when I was studying many, many years ago, we had one of the largest data sets in the country. If you can imagine who would own that data set, and this is kind of sparked off behavioral economics. And this was, we had 2 weeks worth of Sam's Club warehouse data sets of 32 different stores. And it was, at the time, it was 7 terabytes. And in 1997, that was a lot of data. Like, it was a data warehouse with armed personnel outside of it. And it really tells you how far we've come just in the quantity of data. The issue, though, is we're still today trying to understand, like, figure out how to communicate data and how to, like, reference that. My first day of my econ class, I think it was macroecon theory or something like that. The Professor Britton walked into the room and he said, I have a question for you. What is the #1 predicting factor that the CIA will use to predict the amount of heroin that's going to be in New York City next year? And so we started discussing this at length. And we all, we were like freshmen. We thought we knew what we were doing. We had the best ideas. I think mine was like the intelligence that you gather from the criminals you apprehend. I thought that was really smart. I was totally wrong. And the answer that he gave us completely shocked me. And he said the #1 deciding factor in predicting heroin is the price of bread in Afghanistan. And the question is, why is that? Afghanistan controls, or basically grows, 92% of the opiates in the world market. If you also look at Afghanistan from an economic, like what's manufactured, nothing's really manufactured there, but what's produced there is there's opium, wheat, there's fruits and nuts, there's some other stuff in the northern provinces, but for a vast majority of a country as bare as Afghanistan, it's not a thriving economy in any regard. A farmer pretty much has these 2 basic choices of what am I going to grow this year. So I have a choice. I have wheat, or I can grow poppy seeds to produce drugs. So let's say this year, or last year, I have a certain plot of land, and half of that went to wheat, and the other half went to opioids, or poppy. Well, this year I want to change that. I want to make more money. The market rate for heroin is growing, and I'm poor, so I'm going to increase the amount of opiates that I'm going to grow this year. What happens to the supply of that wheat? It decreases. When you have the supply of something decrease and the demand doesn't change for it, basically everyone needs bread. And suddenly if there's less bread on the market, what's going to happen to the price of that bread? It'll jump. So it's kind of basic economics. But when I sort of learned this, it was sort of like instantaneous mind blown episode for me, and a seed was planted, and I was like, wow, this is cool. I grew up with, my dad is a geologist, and I would spend a lot of times at his office, like looking at seismic charts and stuff like that. He did a lot of natural gas drilling and things. My mom is a professional cake decorator. So I would be at home and she's making like wedding cakes and stuff like that. So I'm sure somewhere in in growing up, I was inspired by both of these. But I was really interested in how do you take information that's as complex as trying to understand the price of bread in Afghanistan is connected to heroin in New York. And find this through larger data sets and trying to understand how to communicate this. And the deal is when you're trying to communicate something, you're not just trying to help people, you're not just trying to tell people the information, you want to help them retain that information. So that also took me down a path of like cognitive research. How do our brains work? When you're doing engineering, you understand that subject matter. You're designing a bridge. So there are all these factors in designing that bridge that you have to take into account. The type of rock, the landscape, the climate, there's a lot of different factors. The type of metal, the length, there's all kinds of stuff. You get that, but now let's say that there's a danger with that bridge or there's something with the wind that is really complicated and you need to communicate that to politicians, to a general audience. You have to find ways to communicate that information so that people understand it. And so this is what I do, like professionally, and it's really cool. Like some of the stuff that we do like ends up in the MoMA in New York. Like we have literally work that ends up as art in a museum. I don't know how it gets there. We don't apply for that. We're usually contacted, but I'll show you a little bit of this. And a lot of my focus of what I'm going to talk about today does deal with like research, like more scientifically focused stuff that we have outputs for. Some of our clients, like we do a lot of work with like Facebook, with Google, with Scientific American. We'll do work for these big tech giants sometimes, and they're kind of cool projects. Like for Facebook, I know what they're saying in the media and all that. My direct relation to Facebook for the last 5 years has been super positive. They pay quicker than anyone else. They're really adamant about security. Like we have our developers write in their proprietary code base. We have access to certain data, and there's certain data we have zero access to. And anything that we comp up, it has to go through security. But what we've done is more of like a public facing. It's a big, it's 21 feet by 9 feet multi-touch wall on their campus in Menlo Park. It's about to be torn down because they're changing their partner center. But this was like their flagship. It was like a 36 touch point. You go in there as a big globe, and I don't actually have pictures here, but maybe I can show it later. But we build these relationships with these clients to do this work, but then we'll stop and we'll do personal projects as well. And I'll kind of talk through this a little bit. What I want to try to do though today is try to make the work that we do somehow relatable to your studies. Like I guess what I want to try to do is sort of like plant that seed or start that idea of like, oh, I really want to get into this field, like in my own personal field, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, whatever. And I want to understand the importance of communicating the information that I work with. It's really important to at least understand that, and that's going to really be the focus of today.